The TMJ-TMD conundrum is real and has been puzzling the dental and medical professions for decades. This is the TMJ-TMD Demystified podcast with Dr. Tony Urbanic, where we'll connect the dots between TMD symptoms and the actual cause. We'll tackle common TMD misconceptions and educate you, the practitioner, about a simple, tested, and proven TMD solution that has already provided relief to thousands of patients, while helping practitioners build an additional source of income free from insurance control. Welcome to this episode of the TMJ-TMD Demystified podcast.
Good morning, TMD warriors. We are gathered here on another Tuesday morning for me at TMD Demystified, and I am Tony Urbanic. Today, we will be discussing the topic of indifference, apathy, skepticism, and TMD. The reason I chose this topic for today is that these attitudes, as they apply to TMD, are pandemic. And I think that any one of you, whether or not you are a current network provider or considering becoming a network provider or just listening to this, trying to find out what TMD Demystified is all about, I think most of you would agree that on the topic of TMD, TMJ, most dentists, by far, the vast majority of dentists, share these attitudes: indifference, apathy, and skepticism. Now, I'm sure you've heard the old adage about some people wake up in the morning to see what's going to happen, and other people wake up in the morning to make something happen. Well, I'm of the variety of the second type of person, and because of that, you have to be a good problem solver, because life is nothing more than a series of problems. Once you solve one problem successfully, then naturally another problem will pop up. Life is nothing more than a series of problems, and if you get pretty good at solving problems, you can have a pretty good life. If you don't pay attention to solving problems, or you don't know how to solve problems, your life can get out of hand really quick. And I think that's fairly logical, and anyone who is listening probably can think that through and have that experience of their own, either their own experience or observing that experience with others. My objective with all of the episodes of this podcast, TMD Demystified, is to demystify TMD, to describe it, teach it, elucidate it in a way that is logical, makes sense, and is effective in treating patients and helping doctors use the technology and the knowledge that I have accumulated over years about this problem for the benefit of their own practice and themselves, and of course the patients. Each episode of a podcast is usually considered weeks ahead of time as to the topic that I'm going to choose. Sometimes and most recently, it parallels with the blog that I write once a week. Sometimes the blog itself generates the interest in the topic of the podcast, and sometimes the podcast will generate the interest in the topic in the blog that I write. But I try to parallel the written blog and the video podcast along the same topics week to week. Number one, to make it simple for myself, but also because they are directed, as I've stated before, to different publics. The written blog is directed toward patients and is published primarily on my website and other areas, the website being urbanictmj.com. And the podcast episodes are recorded primarily for dentists. and dental types who have an interest in TMD. So today's topic, to repeat, and title is Apathy, Indifference, Skepticism, and TMD, TMJ. To simplify it, I would like to read into the record a portion of the blog that I wrote just a couple days ago on this topic in an attempt to help the listener consider how to structure making solutions, to create solutions on problems. And what I have to say is very simple, I believe, and a method that I use to attack or address problems that I faced in my life, general problems or problems with practice or problems with patients or technical problems and different kinds of surgery that I've performed, trying to come up with a solution, a creative solution to physical disabilities and physical defects. As a maxillofacial surgeon, that was my career. And quite often, the actual solution was not apparent. It wasn't in the textbook. My career was spent in the operating room primarily doing major facial reconstructions of many kinds. And I can promise you the problems that I faced, many of them, whether they be traumatic or facial growth problems or cleft lip and cleft palate, they were not described in detail in a textbook as to how to address them and how to fix these problems. So, but if you look at problem solving in a general way, you can usually make headway and come up with a relatively good solution. So I would like to read into the record, if you mind, a few paragraphs off of the blog that I wrote a couple days ago. The parallels actually has the exact same topic of apathy, indifference, skepticism, and TMD, TMJ as an example of problem solving that can be applied to and was applied to the solution for TMD, TMJ, and if you extrapolate, it can be applied for any problem in your life. So let's start. So again, apologize for reading this into the record, to the episode, but I think it'll be effective if you allow me to do this. What does apathy, indifference, and skepticism have in common? Look them up in the dictionary and you will find each have a dissimilar definition. What they have in common is each is an attitude. A person has an attitude of apathy. A person has an attitude of indifference. A person has an attitude of skepticism. You have to be a person to have an attitude. Social groups don't have attitudes. Companies don't have attitudes. Schools don't have attitudes. Governments don't have attitudes. Only people have attitudes. You have to be a person to have an attitude. One's attitude about a topic, event, or experience will often create profound effects on a person's life. I bet you can think of hundreds of examples of how your attitude on a subject or about a person affected you in your life. Think about that for a moment. Think about your attitude about your education, a school, a person, a patient, and how that attitude, whatever that attitude is, affected your relationship or how things turned out or ability to solve a problem. So take a moment to do this drill, and this is important. Think of a person or a topic and think about your attitude about that person or topic. Did your attitude about that person or topic draw you closer or push you away? Choose another person or topic and think about your attitude regarding it. Does your attitude draw you toward that item or does it push you away from the item or person? Because your attitude creates your affinity, your attitude about something. If you have an attitude of apathy, it will not draw you toward that person or item. If you have an attitude of indifference, it will not draw you toward that item or person. If you have an attitude of skepticism, it will not draw you toward that person or item. The challenge is, do that drill until it is real to you that your attitude has everything to do with your affinity for a person or thing. So your attitude can also draw you toward a person. Are you attracted or are you pushed away? A person's attitude about something is built on knowledge. So, next point, you can change your attitude, but your attitude is built on your knowledge in general about the person or just your general knowledge. The more you know about something, the more your attitude about it will change. I'll give you a good example. As a pilot going back 55 years, when I was a very, very young pilot, I got my first pilot's license. I enjoyed flying, but I knew very little about the operation of the airplane other than the controls and what the flight instructor was teaching me and what I read in a few basic textbooks. But as I progressed through decades of flight instruction and instruction up through different levels of aircraft and understanding the communication with air route traffic control, understanding the nuances of how an aircraft engine operated and performed, whether it be a reciprocating engine or a turbine engine, learning tremendous amounts about weather and the weather systems that move through, air route traffic control systems and communication with air route traffic control and all the rules that need to be understood and literally memorized. All of this knowledge built together then created a overview of a system that got to be just second nature, and I had more and more affinity for aviation, aircraft, and the whole system over time, all built on knowledge. The more you know about something, the more your attitude will change. Think about that statement for a moment. See if it is not true for you. If it's not true for you, it's not true. Look and see if the more you know about a subject or a person affects your attitude about it. If you find that true, ask yourself a simple question. How can I change my attitude about something? The answer should be, I can change my attitude about something by learning more about it. That's the point that I was trying to make. By learning more about it. So, we have a big problem in dentistry. We have lots of big problems in dentistry, but my big problem to solve in dentistry is that there are bad attitudes of apathy, indifference, and skepticism about TMD and TMJ. And if you follow the reasoning and the logic of what I just went through, the solution is quite simple, and that is, it is built on knowledge. And the more you know about TMD, TMJ, the more your attitude will change and the more you will be drawn toward it. Because right now, with the attitudes of apathy, indifference, and skepticism, the dental industry, dentists in general, the entire dental profession are pushed away from this problem, of which we now have a solution. But they're still pushed away because of their attitude about it, not because there isn't technical knowledge, not because it is not published on podcasts and blogs, because it is all absolutely published, all this information, which is nowhere near as complicated as aviation. It is quite simple. It is not rocket science how to understand the basic mechanics, pathophysiology, anatomy, and technical things you need to know about a device and protocol to make it fully understood. So the understanding about how to treat TMD now is quite simple, with very few facts that you have to memorize. Nowhere near as complicated as operating in the U.S. Aviation system with complicated aircraft. All right, so if you find it true, ask yourself a simple question. How can I change my attitude about something? The answer should be, I can change my attitude about something by learning more about it. Well, all this information, as I said, is available to you. It is available in sequential 25 to 30-minute episodes on these podcasts. It is available on the published blogs that I write that are published on our website. And it is, as I said, it's not rocket science at all, but you have to take the time to gain a little bit of knowledge. And with enough people gaining the basic knowledge of how to treat TMD, we can begin to change the direction of this, what I consider a super tanker, trying to change a large pushback of apathy, indifference, and skepticism about TMD. Because you know who suffers when we do that? The patients suffer. And I can make you familiar or quote with hundreds and hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of patients that I have seen within the past very few years who are very disenchanted with our profession and our professional standards. Again, just quoting one example may not really strike you as important, but I had a patient yesterday, and I think that anyone who sees any number of TMD patients will see these patients with their own attitudes. But the patient I saw yesterday was a nurse. She was a nurse, cardiac care nurse from a city about an hour away from Nashville, who came specifically to see me, and she was angry. I could tell it in her facial expressions. She sat there in my consultation room with her husband. Basically a nice woman, but I knew when I walked in the room and introduced myself that I was dealing with one of those angry patients I have talked about before, and I've actually produced one of the episodes, which I think it's entitled "The Angry TMD Patient." The angry patient. What is she angry about? She's angry about being placed in, going around in circles about this problem, having it misdiagnosed, mistreated, misdirected, having things done to her and for her, quote, for her, that she realized were nonsense. And we had a heart-to-heart talk. With this particular patient, I had to address her in quite a different way than I address most patients. But because she was a nurse, I immediately felt, and I could get some reality with another healthcare professional that I can't necessarily get with a non-healthcare professional. I taught nurses in my earlier educational period, actually as a senior in dental school. I had while I was a master's degree student, spent my senior year in dental school as a master's degree cell biology student, and simultaneously I was invited to teach the course in anatomy physiology to a 3-year nursing program in Indianapolis. It was quite an experience. My point being that I'm familiar with nurses and I can talk their language. And because of that, and in this example with this very angry patient, it took probably 10 minutes of confrontational discussion until I could see her starting to loosen up, mainly from the point of view that as I spelled out what I knew about TMD and what her symptoms were and relating her symptoms to what I could tell her about the problem, she realized that I knew something about the problem. And the more I talked, the more she began to relax. Her facial expressions relaxed. But this is an example of the patients who have been run around in circles for years, and whether or not they're out of the medical establishment or not, they can become very disenchanted when they realize that they've been abused by the system. That has to stop. And that is the overall concept that I'm trying to get through nowadays on most of these episodes on how to solve the problem. I mean, the technical thing has already been discussed in detail. If you want to know how this device works and the pathophysiology of it and how to use it correctly, that's all out there, and I'm not going to repeat myself forever on doing that. The issues are how to change our profession, how to change the attitude about us doctors, dentists, so that we can actually apply this knowledge to the patients, to the angry patients, and get this problem solved nationally and internationally. It's not that complicated. Truly, it's not that complicated. To carry the thought process just a little bit further, and the rest of my blog was directed to the specifics of how this problem-solving method was applied to problem solving the TMD dilemma. I mean, I have spoken before. I was asked to write an article in a dental journal considering how you solve problems. And basically, the basic concept of solving a problem is, first of all problems can be solved. There's not a problem that you cannot solve if you have enough knowledge and start from the basic point of view of this. If you have a problem and can't find a solution, one of two things has occurred and you need to fix. Number one, you're either asking the wrong question about the problem, or you're looking to the wrong source or asking the wrong person. So you're either asking the wrong question to begin with regarding a problem, or you're asking the wrong person or source for assistance, knowledge, to gain knowledge from either a person or a source, but you're asking the wrong one. In the case of TMD, after reading journals applying this concept, after reading journals and for years and going to congresses for years and listening to my colleagues what to do surgically about TMJ problems, and I realized no one had the answer, I decided to do my own research and began by asking the right question of the right source. And the right question of the right source was, I began to interview the patients themselves and ask them what made it better, what made it worse. And that's where the solution came from. I changed the source that I went to. In this case, I went directly to the patients and asked them the simple question: what makes it better? What makes it worse? And they gave me the key as to where to look. They said if I put my finger, my tongue, a pencil eraser between my front teeth and gently bite down, it feels better. So I had the right source and I asked the right question and they gave me the right answer. At which point then I investigated that, made a device that went between the front teeth that you could speak with 24/7, except when you eat. Leave it in long enough to allow the inflammation in the joint to die down. And then I saw so many successful patients using that device, I had to figure out exactly how it worked and what was the pathophysiology as to how and why, if you separate the back teeth over a protocol period of time, and then found out inflammation dies down within the temporomandibular joint, and that inflammation drives all of the symptoms, then you've solved the problem. Now we have to teach it to as many doctors as we can to service and treat as many patients as we can so that we don't have angry patients. All right, so finish this up. Doing this simple drill can have profound consequences in a person's life. It is a logical way to take control of your own life and start to solve life's problems. Everybody has problems to solve. Life is nothing more than a series of problems and solutions which lead to the next series of problems and solutions. We choose better solutions to our problems by having the right attitude, which requires us to seek more knowledge about the problem, which will lead us to understanding the problem to the point that we come up with an appropriate and successful solution. Now, some of this may sound overly didactic or may sound overly simplified to you, but it is a tried and proved method to solving a problem, which I must include in solving problems. Always use all of your resources. And that's another thing that has dropped out. People think of resources. I mean, if I say, well, what are your resources to solve this problem? And immediately, pretty much everybody says money, and money is power, no doubt about it, but money doesn't solve all problems for sure. So, you need to consider what all of the resources you have to call on. In the case of TMD, TMJ, and the solution, I had the resources of a long line of patients who wanted to talk to me as a surgeon trying to fix their TMD problem. And so one of my resources was all of the patients that were available to me. That was a resource, and I used that resource to solve the problem. So the solution for TMD, TMJ was built upon the progression and application of these concepts. The solution for TMD, TMJ was developed because I maintained the right attitude about how to solve a problem which demanded that I seek further knowledge on the topic. Knowledge from the patients. I have found that all problems have successful solutions. If you cannot find a successful solution, you are either asking the wrong question or you are asking the wrong person or source. If you ask the right question from the right source, you can always come up with a successful solution to the problem. And the example that I just gave you of solving the TMD dilemma conundrum was a great example of solving a problem using your resources, asking the right question from the right source, and then developing from that, having the right attitude. The TMD, TMJ conundrum dilemma was solved by using this method. Instead of seeking knowledge from the usual sources, colleagues, journals, textbooks, and lectures, I chose to start with the patients who gave me the key as what to do. I did that, it was successful. I did it 30 more times, and it was successful 30 times. Then I did the research necessary to find out why it was successful. The result is the Urbanic device and protocol. Dentists, professors, and researchers tried and could not find the solution for TMD, TMJ because they had the wrong attitude about the topic. They, as individuals, had the attitude of apathy, indifference, and skepticism. Remember, we said the vast majority of dentists have this attitude about the problem, and most of them still carry these attitudes. They were asking the wrong question from the wrong source. Ask the average dentist. He or she will tell you that regarding TMJ, nothing works. That is exactly the attitude that kept the solution for TMD, TMJ hidden for 70 years. So, ladies and gentlemen, if you have an attitude that does not draw you into the solution, you need to change your attitude. And the way you change your attitude is by more knowledge on that topic or about that person. And again, remember, if you cannot find the solution, then either you're asking the wrong question or you're asking the wrong source. I made my point. I really appreciate it if you stuck with me this far. I hope that what I've said here and what I wrote on this related blog will give you significant help in your life, in your practice, in your relationship with patients, with your family, but on general problem solving, and specifically in solving the TMD conundrum dilemma. I appreciate your attention and would definitely appreciate comments and even criticisms about what I have to teach and what I have to say. It would be very helpful to me to get feedback from you. I encourage you to contact me at tony@tmjservices.net. If you'd like to learn more about our company and how you can participate as a network provider in using the Urbanic device and protocol, I would lead you to our website, which is www.urbanictmj.com. We have a growing list of network providers throughout the United States, and we are starting to grow very rapidly now in many different ways. We manufacture the device ourselves and have control over the quality, and encourage others to participate in the solution for TMD-TMJ. Until next time, next Tuesday, I will select another topic. Hopefully it will be as interesting or more interesting than how to solve problems in your life and how to address that specifically toward the solution for temporomandibular joint TMD-TMJ problems. Until then, I am Tony Urbanic, and this is TMD Demystified.